Guys, welcome to book review number 81. Today I will be reviewing The Snow Leopard by Peter Matthiessen. So Peter Matthiessen is a sort of spiritual travel writer type that decided to go to the remote western regions of Nepal this in 1978, so this book's a little older, with a naturalist and a biologist named George Stoller. And so George went to western Nepal to find the snow leopard, the name of the book, as well as the sheep called the burl that the snow leopard feed on. And his journey was much more scientific. They went at the same time. And Peter covers much of what kind of George studied too. But Peter is more of, he's not a Buddhist monk, but he's definitely more into the spiritual side of Buddhism, kind of wanted to explore both the Bon, which is the religion that preceded Tibetan Buddhism, as well as Buddhism in Tibet. Now that being said, during this time period, it was right at the end of the Cultural Revolution in China. So really Tibet had kind of been ransacked. And one of the few areas of the world, or of this region, that Peter felt that Tibetan Buddhism still existed kind of on its natural state, or its original state, was the western region of Tibet. Now if you know anything about Tibet, or not Tibet, of Nepal. Now, if you know anything about Nepal, you know that it's primarily a Hindu state with a significant Buddhist, primarily Tibetan Buddhist minority. And so he couldn't really go to Kathmandu because even though there's a Tibetan Buddhist presence there, it's certainly kind of a fusion culture. He wanted to see the original culture. So he went to Western Tibet, or Western Nepal, I keep saying Tibet, Nepal, in this area called the Dolpo, specifically the inner Dolpo. Just kind of a couple things about the journey. He had to hire porters and Sherpas, which is kind of standard operating procedure at that time. And really, I think if you go to the remote regions of Tibet, it's still the standard operating procedure nowadays. He had the kind of standard run-ins with more as porters than as Sherpas, in that they would agree to it, walk 3 miles, and then demand higher pay, or give up on the expedition and go back, and George and Peter would be stranded. So there was always kind of that constant conflict and tension. The Sherpas were much better. The Sherpas were of Tibetan stock mostly. The porters, they would tend to hire a porter in one town and then relieve them in the next town, and so on and so on. But the Sherpas were with the group the entire way. I think the Sherpa that he really liked was Terwa, who had kind of the reputation of a lout, but despite his kind of, he was kind of quiet and reserved and kind of shifty-eyed, was actually the most loyal member of the expedition, and really helped Peter out in innumerable ways in getting through this land. Particularly when you look at how rugged the land is and how hard the trails were. Many of the passes, or many of the passes, I don't know what other word I was going to use other than passes, that Peter and George have to go through are anywhere between 13,000 feet and like 17 to even, I think, maybe close to 18,000 feet. This being the time of year where there are snow on the higher passes, so getting over them, even in the summertime, is not easy. But this time of year, they went in like November, late October and November, is not easy at all. So eventually they get to the inner Dolpo after kind of passing, some of the passes, the Jangla Pass, Not that this means a whole lot. And then the Kangla Pass, the Kangla Pass being the highest pass, the 18,000 foot pass. They get to the Crystal Mountain. Now, I should say one other thing. I mentioned the passes. I forgot to also mention the trails. These are not wide USA maintained, 15-foot wide trails. Often these trails are 2 feet wide with a sheer drop to one side and a sheer rise up to the other side. So Peter often mentioned that, in Zen Buddhism, encourages you to be in the moment and just be very meditative and be in the here and now. And he said that though you can achieve that through meditation, often the easiest way to achieve that is through sheer fear of, your foot slips, you're off the precedent, you're dead. That'll put you in the moment more than anything else on the planet, probably. So eventually they get to the crystal, in the Inner Dolpo. Their true kind of destination in the Inner Dolpo is the Crystal Monastery, as well as She Gumta, which is the main mountain right next to the monastery, a holy mountain to the people of the Inner Dolpo, the Tibetan Buddhists of the Inner Dolpo. Maybe not as sacred to the whole of Tibetan Buddhism, but particularly kind of a regional pilgrimage site and a sacred site. So they search, most of what they do is they search for the sheep, because kind of Peter is along with George Schaller, who's really the main drive. But also Peter goes off the side and visits the monasteries and stuff. But they see a lot of tracks of snow leopards. They see a lot of the burl with their eyes. Now they never see a snow leopard in the Crystal Monastery, She Gumta region, primarily because they're so elusive. And they're just kind of predators, so they're going to remain hidden until they reveal themselves in an attack. And the hope would be that they would see an attack on a sheep or a burl, but they never do. Now that being said, a lot of evidence, also a lot of the monks in the region said that they had previously seen snow leopards. There were snow leopards known to these people. That being said, I think Peter and George were a little bit disappointed in not seeing a snow leopard in this region, because it's kind of like see it with your own eyes is something way more ephemeral than, or way more visceral, I should say, not ephemeral, visceral than just seeing poop droppings. So the other thing that Peter does is he goes to a number of different monasteries in the region. Now the problem is this time of year, a lot of the monks have moved down to the lower regions, so outside of 2 people that are kind of maintaining the monasteries on a skeleton crew over the winter, he really doesn't have access to most of the monetary facilities, and is actually not able to even get into She Gumta. I believe, no, maybe he is able to get into She Gumta. I can't really remember. Maybe he's able to get in on like the last day because one of the monks comes up from one of the lower regions and opens the doors for them, the monk with the main key. So really he has to observe the main monastery from the outside, and then some of the stupas that are unlocked that are just little kind of like chapels. That's what we would call them in the West. He's able to go see those. Now I will say one thing that I was kind of disappointed with about this book, now that we're talking about Buddhism and kind of Peter's end of it, is it really is pretty esoteric. There's a lot of things in here that if you're just kind of a casual reader, you're not going to get. That being said, the stuff that you won't get because it is esoteric, because it's kind of Buddhist knowledge that people wouldn't be accustomed to, or kind of names and faces and historical events that people wouldn't be accustomed to. Peter ties very much emotion, particularly his own emotion. Matter of fact, a large part of this book, it's written in a diary style, not in like a style afterwards, so it's kind of written day by day, is very much his response to the environment around him, which I think is good for a while, but also kind of drolls on at times. This is, I think, over a 300-page book. Yeah. And I enjoyed it, but there's times that it gets a little droll. Let's see, what else? Okay, so after visiting Crystal Monastery, checking all the burl, their habits. I will say one of the cool things in the book is even though they didn't see a snow leopard hunt, the endangered species snow leopard, they're so hard to find. Matter of fact, they're in this remote region, which is why they're so hard to find. It's not like they're wolves, which I'm about to mention, or like some common predator. They're sort of like Siberian tigers or something that they're almost impossible to see because there are so few of them and they're in this remote region. So, where was I going with this? After they leave Crystal Monastery and all the religious significance as well as biological significance there, Peter and George break up for the way home. Peter actually leaves, I think, about a month to a half month ahead of George. And so they go into the Saldung region, which, although not exactly the lowlands, is sort of the area where a lot of the people in the Crystal Monastery go in the winter to kind of feed their yaks, to provide food, to get to more acclimatized regions. He sees a few monasteries here, one that's really well upkept, Namdo, another one that's not, Salmgong, as well as the city, and it's actually just an encampment with no modern features, of Saldang, which I believe is actually right on the Tibetan border. So at this point, he is in the very, very north of Tibet. At which point, after he sees Saldang, he obviously doesn't go into Tibet. He goes south on his return journey. And I think he hired a porter, oddly enough, named Karma, who he was very disappointed. He enjoyed the enthusiasm of the porter, but the porter had completely unrealistic expectations of what it was going to take to get back to civilization. The porter said it would be a day and a half, and it took like 4.5 days through multiple passes that were all snowbound. Really hard trudging, hard trekking. But then he eventually makes it back to Merwa. I know this is kind of esoteric in and of itself, so people might not know where that is. But it's right next to a really cool lake. Get to see that. He's already seen the Pungmo Monastery there. Heads back to the south. Through kind of the Kanjarobori Gorge, and then gets a flight out of Jumla. So that's all kind of esoteric, or I know that that's kind of hard to relate to, but he has a hard trek back. Now, the one thing that Peter does see is he sees a red panda. Now, he never sees a snow leopard, but he sees a red panda, which is also not like the pandas of China, but actually sort of almost like a large fox red looking creature, but maybe a little more bulky, but also not a predator. It's a herbivore. So he sees that, and it's real cool. Eventually, George follows him back, and he kind of mentions this in the post notes, that George, on his way back after they had separated, takes a slightly different route and sees a snow leopard that kind of bounds across a pass for just a quick second. That is just there and gone, maybe 50 yards ahead of them when they're trekking through one of these high passes. But George does get to see one before he leaves, so that's kind of cool. Overall, okay, so I've kind of done more of the route now. Overall, like I said, it's a book that if you're really into Tibetan Buddhism, I would recommend. If you're really into the remote regions of the world. But if you're looking for more, I'd say like a fun read or like a light read, this really is not it. That being said, if you're willing to kind of wade out into some of the more deeper waters of Tibetan Buddhism, of kind of obscure, biology, and also I should say, at moments this book is really visceral. I think about the cold, icy rivers that they have to pass through. I think of the high mountain peaks. I think of the cairn of yak skulls. So normally a cairn is made of it's like a Tibetan kind of not worship site, but almost like a sort of statue. But they don't have statues in this region, and that people just pile these high rocks that are in these triangular piles. But in one particular region of Dolpo, because yaks are so common, they actually made an entire cairn of yak skulls. And you're in sort of desperate straits crossing a high pass, not thinking you're going to make it, and then you get this kind of very eerie, very eerie, kind of horrid, jarring thing of yak skulls as you cross the pass. I mean, that's pretty crazy. So anyway, I think I'll leave it at that. I think I said my criticisms, said my compliments. Overall, this is a good book. Check it out. The Snow Leopard by Peter Matthiessen. All right. Keep up for more updates, you guys.